Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first of our webinar series for 2021. 2020 was an interesting year. I mean, when you speak to people, some people say it's interesting, some say it was a good year, some people say it's a bad year. But 2020 is spent cash, and 2022 is post-dated check. Today is cash, 2021. So what do we expect for 2021? And we have, I think, the best people here to talk about it. They will introduce themselves when the time comes. And what do we expect for 2021? Is it going to be an interesting year? Is it going to be a good year? Is it going to be a bad year? What does it hold for the fintech ecosystem? And what are the opportunities that are available for 2021 that we can quickly key into and make money? I think we're all in business to make money. So our panelists will do justice to that. I'm not a panelist, so I shouldn't be talking about it. So right away, I'll hand over to the president of the Fintech Association of Nigeria, who will be giving us a short keynote on what to expect for 2021. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ade Bajomo. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, and a very happy new year to you. Let me take on from where Babatunde stopped. Interesting 2020. Maybe that captures whether it's good, bad, or ugly. But I think when we all think about 2020, in our industry, which uses the word disruption very, very loosely, I guess the one that just sticks out is the year of COVID disruption, so to speak. COVID almost or nearly changed a number of things. I wouldn't say everything, a number of things really. It started and everybody thought it was something in the Far East that would never get down to our area. And very quickly, the whole world was on slowdown. And before we realized it, we were on lockdowns. And new words and new habits, just evolved from nowhere. Remote working and all sorts of things like that. And the other side of it, the flip side of it, is that on the social side, on the economic side, the world saw a really major slowdown. We saw labor strikes, we saw activists around the world, Black Lives Matter, we got our version in Nigeria, NSAS, and all sorts of things like that. And there was an increase in insecurity. But in all of these, fintech kept on going. Yeah. Financial services, financial technology kept driving and kept moving. And it shows how durable this industry is fundamentally and will continue to be, certainly in Nigeria and broadly in Africa, because we have a number of problems to solve. We have a number of issues to solve, and fintechs play a very critical part in us solving those issues. If you look at the size of the global financial services market, it's estimated at about 26.5 billion, growing at 6% into 2022. And then you bring it back into, if you like, digital payments, which is primarily the area fintechs play. I know fintech, by the way, covers all technologies, insurtech, regtech, but we use that word fintech, pretty loosely to cover all sorts of technology. But if we take that digital payment strand of fintechs, that's 25% of that financial services industry that I've just spoken about. And there are lots of opportunities that still remain, lots of problems to be solved, in that market. So, 2021, we certainly will be seeing more innovation around financial inclusion. If you look at the level, Babatunde was talking about cash, the use of cash, cashless. If you look at the level of penetration in terms of digital solutions that we need to develop and actually accelerate in terms of driving growth within Africa and within Nigeria specifically. 2021 will probably see blockchain come of age and come more mainstream, so to speak. We're seeing some regulators around the world, in the Far East, in the Americas, actually not those kind of stuff. And the baseline, the background, or the architectural infrastructure for that clearly remains blockchain. We're going to see, and I hope to see, more investments in fintechs. Hopefully more investments by Nigerians, by Africans in fintechs in Africa. Clearly more investment from everywhere will be most welcome. It's a global industry. We have to collaborate. We have to take the best from the world and the best from us to solve our own problems. There will be a growth, in my opinion, in insurtech. that's an area that's probably been overlooked for several years, and we'll start seeing that particular industry popular. Data is going to be extremely key in whatever we do. It's the year of data. Fintechs have actually leveraged data quite savvy, in a savvy manner, but we're going to see more depth in terms of analytics, use cases, advanced analytics, really. And I hope that in 2021, the Nigerian fintech industry and the broader African fintech will raise the game 1 or 2 bars away from just the basic development and software development into now providing some really insightful, durable use cases that are driving AI, machine learning, deeper analytics in the various ways that will leverage technology and raise that game up from the basic level into a much more durable level. If we're talking technology, if we're talking digital, if we're talking digital acceleration, we cannot talk about all of those things without actually underpinning it with security. There was a McKinsey report that I read that in 10 years' time, 60% of bank failures will be due to information security breaches. 60%. So that's a lot of number. So just imagine if you're a fintech, and you're not thinking security, you're just going to be launched for these criminals. So security becomes extremely key. You have a distinguished set of panelists here. I'm really, really delighted to have them all here. And I'm sure they will do very good justice, to the subject matter in terms of how best you prepare for 2021. I wish you all a very interesting, insightful webinar. And let me hand over to Oremeyi to take it on from there. Who's the moderator for today? Over to you, Oremeyi.
I'll go to my panelists right now, and I'll just ask you to please allow them to introduce themselves. Preeti, would like to start with you. Will you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Oremeyi. Thank you for having me, and a good afternoon to everyone. I am the co-founder of Coronet Blockchain, based here in South Africa. It's a supply chain solution which we focus on product quality, availing a marketplace where consumers can access quality vetted kinds of products, and we avail systems to ensure that every member of the supply chain has an access to systems that help their business to be sustainable. Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Preeti. We look forward to positive conversations.
My name is Funmilola Odumuboni. I work within the Cyber Services Unit in Deloitte in West Africa. I'm a technology enthusiast. I love seeing people and seeing organizations leverage technology in a secure manner. And within Deloitte, what we do is that we help organizations plan strategy around security, around technology innovation using security. We help them assess their security, ethical hacking, penetration tests. We also help our organizations monitor, do 24/7 monitoring of their systems, as well as help them respond and investigate incidents. It's really a pleasure being here and sharing thoughts with these wonderful panelists. Thank you very much.
All right,
Hello.
You're welcome. You're welcome for me.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Iniabasi Akpan. I'm the Managing Director and Country Manager for OPay in Nigeria. It's my pleasure to be here, to be part of this very special, panel, just to share our thoughts on what the Fintech Outlook would look like. OPay is a global digital financial services company that is, been set up to, foster and deepen financial inclusion, with a Pan-African vision. So generally we have a Pan-African vision to drive financial inclusion all across Africa. And some of the services we provide and we're licensed to provide by the central bank include, wallet accounts. So it means that you can have a wallet account, to do your transactions. You can also access cash in, cash out services at our agent points. We currently have about 300,000 agents across Nigeria. You can also access other services like bill payments, airtime, and you can also do bank account withdrawals and also bank transfers. All of these services are available at the agent network. But also, you can also download the app and also use the app to do those services directly yourself. So we're quite excited to be part of what's happening in Nigeria, and we hope that we'll be able to shape, how things will pan out and make sure that the landscape and the objective of CBN is achieved. So that's just who we are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So you have it. We have 3 experts around the table today. We have expertise in blockchain technology. We have expertise in mobile money. And then we also have a security expert, cyber security expert here. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So we'll go right into the questions. So we'll start with Ini. Again, you mentioned OPay having 300,000 agents. That's very laudable. Our first question is around looking at before and after the pandemic. So looking specifically at last year, 2020, what noticeable differences did you observe in the mobile money space, in the agency banking space? What noticeable differences did you observe that led to or that underpinned business growth and customer behavior? What noticeable changes did you notice in customer behavior last year as a result of the pandemic?
All right, that's a very good question. I mean, I'm sure that it's all obvious to us. I mean, what the realities are. We've had to face significant challenges last year with the pandemic, the social distancing rules, the lockdowns. I mean, it was a pretty challenging year for most businesses, and obviously, you can say that there were different results for different people. Some businesses, in some segments, there was a slow growth or slowed down growth. But in other segments, I mean, we've seen significant growth. I mean, even in the fintech space, if we take a look at the fintech space, I mean, certain segments of the business obviously slowed down, but others picked up. And I'll give an example. So, for instance, we have, we've seen a spike in the number of transactions that people actually access because people have had to find new ways, to access services, especially with the lockdown. We've seen an increase of at least a double, over 200% increase in the usage, which we experienced between January and June during the lockdown. But also some of the reports that are available, from McKinsey showed that, I mean, between the period of March and April, I mean, agent business grew by about 800%. I mean, and that's quite significant. So people began to look for new ways to actually access financial services. And that's a very, very significant number. Other bank users also increased their frequency of using agent services and all the other services. So we saw an increase, generally overall. And I think it was generally a good year for the payments and the payment segment of the fintech industry. Because, I mean, when we look at from the beginning of last year to the end of the year, our business grew by about 400%. And that's quite significant. So, as people begin to, look for new ways and to keep safe, then they begin to look for other options. And I think that the fintech industry has benefited. So in all, I think the pandemic has forced a change in behavior generally. And I think that it's a good thing for the fintech industry at this point. I mean, there's still lots of ground to cover, but I think it's a good sign.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ini. You just mentioned several things. Consumer behavior changed. And while it came with its challenges, while it came with people started looking for new ways to do things. And so solutions that were tailored to meet the consumers where they are at that point of need were solutions that actually scaled. You mentioned some amazing numbers, 400% growth, 300,000 agents. That is great. And that's great, not just for, of course, your business, but for the landscape and for what that says about Africa, what that says about, the opportunities that lie. We're going to come back to you, but I'll go to Preeti now. Preeti, it's very interesting that you are in the blockchain, in industry, leveraging blockchain. There's a lot of buzz around this technology, but what's interesting is that you're not just talking about it, you're not just theorizing, you are actually practically deploying it in a very relevant global global use case. I mean, you did mention that you already your company right now does leverages supply blockchain for the supply and distribution of human hair across Africa. That's great. And you also have mentioned, I mean, so I'll just let you go on anyway. So, but basically our question at this point is looking at 2020 and this emerging technology, which you were successfully able to deploy in the midst of the challenges. I would like you to tell us how that technology was able to, blockchain technology specifically now, was able to leverage, you know, the nuances of 2020, you know, and deliver solution in the midst of the challenges that the year came with.
Thank you so much for the question, Oremeyi. As some of our colleagues usually say that blockchain, it is a solution that is looking for a problem. And we can all agree that 2020 was full of a lot of problems that we saw across industry. On a macro level, we saw a word supply chain shock emerge, referring to the difficulty in the movement of goods, referring to the lack of transparency on what goes into the products, and trust issues went through the roof as global trade became a reality where companies, especially small and medium enterprises that had to depend on imported products, that sometimes they have to go to the source to ensure they are there physically, to ensure that these products, they confirm that are in good quality, and most importantly, paying a supplier that you have never met when you are a small or medium enterprise became very difficult for them to be able to trust. So on a micro level now, what we saw specifically on this side of South Africa, we had a budget of about 50 billion US dollars, rands rather, sorry about that, that was assigned for a COVID relief. And we saw specifically within the salon sector, 80% of the salons could not access that due to them not having, first and foremost, being on an informal sector and not having traceable record to prove that they've been existing for this long. And we saw the workforce within the industry, 80% not being able to access unemployment insurance fund because they were not sustainably employed. They were not formally employed and registered within the government regulations that needed them to be registered. So they couldn't access any kind of help with that. And we saw our government as well publishing a gazette that insisted that the salon sector use digital booking system and digital payments because there's a lot of cash going around. There's no keeping of records. So now we needed to make sure that we can track everybody that has been into their establishment. So through all of that, it presented a very captive audience for the blockchain technology as it moved from maybe it's a nice thing to have into it is a must thing to have now, because there's that distance between trade, especially the human hair supply chain being a global supply chain where there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of stakeholders with different interests. So we needed to build a more transparent platform. And my last point was we saw a lot of investments ourselves. We closed about 2 tranches of funding with IBM within the year of last year. It's the biggest check in South Africa that have signed for a startup, which shows the confidence towards the technology and the real pain points that it solves for real life people.
That's fantastic, Pretty. You know, what's so great about your narration or what you just explained is the fact that it was solving real problems for real people. Businesses that would otherwise have vanished, businesses that would otherwise have been none, families that would have, you know, been so negatively impacted because of the ability, like you said, blockchain has always been a solution looking for a problem. The problems came up, and it's so fantastic that Coronet was able to, you know, step in and deploy that technology in a very practical way. You mentioned transparency was required. You mentioned the need for trust, which is a core factor in business. And Coronet was able to leverage the blockchain technology for those salons, you know, and I mean, that's just fantastic. We're going to come back to you for sure. Fumi, you know, we've heard a lot already about, you know, how 2020 was the year that so many things changed. I mean, Ini and Preeti just told us about how businesses actually grew, because we know the fintech was quite resilient in midst of the challenges. But I'd like you to speak to us from a cybersecurity perspective. I mean, for sure, there were trends that were noticed, there were threats, there were, I mean, new kind of issues that came up, new kinds of trends that we hadn't seen before. Can you just, with retrospect to 2020, can you put into context the resultant effects and how that reflected in the cybersecurity space? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is a very good question. Thank you so much for that. 2020 was a very busy year in terms of cybersecurity and from the perspective of cyber criminals. There was a report that said that the global losses of from cybercrime in 2020 skyrocketed to almost $1 trillion in 2020 alone. And it's mind-boggling, because in 2020, every couple of weeks or almost every week, you will hear of one data breach, one company being taken down, one thing happening. And you would see, and what was noticed that in 2020, the average time that companies were able to discover a breach took about 207 days. So imagine a hacker or an attacker staying within the network, exfiltrating information, getting information for over 200 days. You can imagine how much they would have gotten. And ransomware attacks. Ransomware is an attack whereby a hacker is able to take hold of a system, kind of like lock the system, encrypt the system such that users cannot use that system or that server or whatever. Ransomware attacks in 2020 alone grew by 130%. That shows that a lot of organizations around the world and even in Nigeria were being hit by ransomware attacks. I'll just talk about some of them. Some of them have made headlines, like, for example, the Experian attack, the credit card company in South Africa. They had an attack, a social engineering attack. And what happened was that someone was able to try to say he's somebody else, a client, and the person was able to get a lot of confidential information, credit card information, and a lot of information about their customers. Over 24 million individuals were affected by that attack alone. We also know about the Cognizant attack, which happened earlier in 2020. And Cognizant is a tech company. They do managed security services, they for IT systems, cloud, and all that. And this company had what we call a ransomware attack, where their systems were being encrypted, and they ran the risk of their client systems, fintech organizations and other organizations that are hosting services, critical services within their environment. They ran the risk of those systems also being encrypted, but they were able to recover and come back quickly. Even though they were able to recover, they lost up to $70 million in Q2 because of that attack. And the one that it's even more mind-boggling was the one that happened towards the end of last year, where SolarWinds, a tech company that also provides applications to a lot of organizations, thousands and thousands of organizations all over the world. There are Orion software that does network monitoring and all. And we saw that they said, reports are saying state-sponsored, but let me just say hackers had put a bug or a malicious application within the Orion software, such that when they deployed updates to their customers all over the world, these updates had the malicious code, which was a backdoor. And so we were able to see that a lot of organizations were affected thousands and thousands of organizations were affected. And we don't even at this point know the full extent of that attack, because if you are using the application, your business is at risk. You don't know what actually is the full extent. FireEye, a security organization, they had a breach so that attackers were able to get very confidential tools that they use to scan the systems of their customers. So these are just some of the, we can't exhaust. 2020 was very, very eventful. Almost every week we got news headlines of things that were happening, and these are just some of them. And it's very, very interesting that a report says that 95% of the breaches happened as a result of human error. And more than 80% of the reported incidents were as a result of phishing, where people send emails that are not correct to make you release confidential information. So we can talk more, but those are just some of the headlines, the mind-boggling things that happened in 2020.
Thank you, Funmi. In fact, really mind-boggling. The numbers that you are dishing out, and I mean, the scale of impact, very huge. So it's obvious, while, I mean, we're talking here fintech, technology, and financial services, and we're talking of the opportunities, we're talking of the growth that we saw in 2020, but it's so fantastic that we're able to juxtapose that with the threat and the risk that came along with that. We're definitely coming back to you. But something that stood out very strongly is data. So like you said, you know, people are able to get into a network, and what do they want? They want to make away with data. So we're going to come back on to speak more about the opportunities and our outlook for 2021, but data is definitely something we're going to speak about. What is the value of data, and how can we leverage data relevantly in our context in Nigeria and across Africa, of course. So in looking at, I mean, just going back to that, you know, 2021, definitely, I mean, what are we expecting to see? And specifically, we're saying, you mentioned when you were speaking that, I mean, while there was a lot of growth in your industry, in the mobile money and agency banking space, there's still so much to be done. And of course, that is so. So I would like you to just give us, I mean, just an insight on how do you see competition playing out in that space in 2021. I mean, you are aware, I mean, for example, that right now we have PSB banks. The regulator has licensed PSB players in the industry. That's definitely going to throw up a new color to the competitive landscape. So will you just speak to us about how you foresee growth to come in 2021? How do you expect the competitive landscape to, you know, turn out to be? And what technologies do you foresee will drive growth in this space, the space of mobile money, agency banking, financial services generally? Over to you.
All right, thank you, Oremeyi. I mean, that's a good question. You know, so the fact is that, you know, Nigeria is a very interesting place. And I can tell you that competition in Nigeria is fierce. So you can already see, I mean, currently we have over 200 known implementations of fintech or players in the marketplace in Nigeria. So Nigeria is fast developing. So it's a market that everybody is interested in, because there are lots of things working for Nigeria, especially in the fintech space. We have a young, I mean, more than 50% of the population is youth and they are digitally savvy. I mean, there's an increasing smartphone penetration across Nigeria, you know, among the seniors and even the middle-aged and across the entire spectrum, you know, of the customer space. And then we also have favorable regulatory policies. The CBN is doing a great job, you know, in terms of, you know, opening up the space and trying to, you know, welcome in as many players as possible. You know, so it shows an interesting picture of what the Nigerian market looks like. You know, if you have 200 players, it can tell you that the competition is serious. Everybody wants market share. So, I mean, you can already, from these things, you know, predict what will happen. I think that there's going to be increased competition this year. You know, I mean, forget the pandemic, there's going to be increased competition, you know, and also potentially, you know, more collaboration between the fintech players and the incumbent banks. And you know, I think that it will be good for the industry, because, you know, the opportunities are immense. There are so many there are so many customers who are looking for, for services that will meet their needs, and whether in the mass market, whether in the just the consumer segment, which includes the seniors, the juniors, or the middle-aged people. So there are various people, there are SMEs also, the micro merchants who are looking for opportunities, and their needs are not being met. I mean, most of the we have over 400,000 micro merchants today in the marketplace who have needs, in payments, in unsecured loans, short-term unsecured loans that can help them in financing their business. So overall, you see, Nigeria has huge potentials, for the fintech space. So there's going to be increased competition, most especially in the offline and online acquiring and payment space. I mean, there's going to be significant competition there. And for people to be able to harness and see these opportunities, they obviously fintech players need to look at their unique skills and their strengths, and to be able to capitalize this and build capacity, most importantly. But also, I also feel that there's going to be increased lending activity. A lot of people are trying to recover from the pandemic right now. So the lending space is a growing segment in Nigeria today. And so I believe that the lending activities will increase in 2021 as people look for means to improve their business and turn things around. So there's huge opportunity for the fintechs, to leverage, and to grow their business in Nigeria. And I think that's a good thing. But what are the technologies that I think will be very useful in this space? I think the wallet is going to be very key. The wallet is going to be very key. POS is going to be very key. Payment gateways are going to be very key. These are technologies that I think that are going to be very key to actually unlock the potentials for the fintech in the Nigerian space. So these are some of the areas that I think that would be useful, for the fintechs to watch out for in 2021.
Thank you, Ini. You said so much. You said so much. You talked about, so I'll start from, the end. You said wallets, POS, payment gateways. You talked about capacity for players to harness the opportunities. The opportunities are there. You mentioned our population demographics, the young people, not just in Nigeria, of course, but even Africa. I mean, globally, we have the highest, percentage of youths between the age of 18 to about 40. And I mean, that is and that is growing. And you mentioned that is a ready market, but you mentioned capacity, you mentioned increased competition. I'm very sure as well, because you were talking capacity and competition, there is definitely the opportunity for collaboration among players just to be able to harness the opportunities properly. You mentioned lending, and while it is an opportunity, but like Funmi said, there's a lot of risk in there. So of course, players need to balance the risk and the opportunity. So those were some very interesting things that came out from what you said. Thank you. We're going to come back to you. We have some questions around this line, but I'll quickly move back to Preeti now. So looking at this, all the opportunities that we talked about generally in the fintech space, but now Preeti, back to you. You have already been able to deploy blockchain technology for a particular use case, but I believe there are other use cases and other industries that this technology, of course, can be leveraged in 2021. Can you just give us an outlook of the opportunities that, within the context of Africa, within the context of cross-border trade, and how we can adopt commercial blockchain in other industries to scale the adoption of this technology in Africa for the purpose of solving real problems?
Thank you so much for the question. I have about 3 most likely to succeed use of blockchain within the 2021. These ones that I've chosen is because they have an ability to solve specifically African problems that are legacy problems, that are current problems, and problems that we will face in the future should we leave these not solved. one of the use cases is the use of blockchain within supply chain to solve problems like food security, food safety, and implementation in other industries that are within the supply chain, the track and distribution of the vaccine, even as we speak, and other areas like minerals and all of that. And the second one, use cases that will be very successful this year and in the rest of the decade, is the use of technology within finance to respond to questions around the high cost of remittances, the high cost of currency exchange, being able for global payments to happen swiftly on a personal level, on the business to business level. And the last use I will touch on will be the use of blockchain to administrate land when it comes to registry, the management of land. If we're going to increase our production capacity in order to respond to our growing population and the growing need now of food security, COVID or no COVID, food is still needed. So we have learned that we cannot always rely on importing goods. We need to produce them on the ground. So land is a primary resource that we need to know that it is accessible as an asset. It is accessible to people to be able to increase whatever production capacity that need to be increased locally. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Preeti. And I'm just going to come back to you right now. So you mentioned 3 use cases that will solve real problems in Africa. You mentioned land, you mentioned within finance, you mentioned the use of blockchain technology for food security and food safety. Can you just tell us again, if you can just give us an insight into, these are very, you've given us specific examples, but can you just give us any specific use case that you see already coming up in any of these 3 areas?
I think I will make an example on one of the use cases that we are working with 3 educational institutions on the food security and food safety aspect, where we are deploying the blockchain technology, one, to ensure the food security so that we know what goes into our food safety, we know what goes into our food, to building capacity to small-scale farmers. In Africa, we've got about 40 million farmers, of which about 6 million of those are commercial farmers. 33 million of those farmers are still small-scale farmers that don't play so much within the supply chain of the food supply chain. They are quite fragmented. They don't have access to systems. So we are working to ensure that we increase their contribution, we increase their participation within the supply chain. We are availing them an access to mainstream food markets where there's a lot of transactions happening, and because of their volumes, because of them not having system to prove that what went into producing the produce that they have, it meets the requirements that are needed on mainstream retailing and mass marketing of food, for example. So we are availing those systems to ensure that they have access to the digital infrastructure to make sure that everything from how they grow and distribute their food, is recorded, and ensure that they meet financial inclusion requirements that are needed to make sure that they have access to financing when they need to scale, they have access to financing when they need to grow their businesses. So that's one of the very exciting use of blockchain that we are working on. Very good for collaboration.
Fantastic, Preeti. Thank you. And just to say what you've said is very, I can resonate with that. Christmas just passed, and in Nigeria, people always give out rice for Christmas gifts. Prior to now, your only option would have been imported rice. But last year, I can tell you that, an institution I'm involved with distributed over 400 bags of rice, and all of them were from local small-scale farmers. And so what you've just said, using blockchain technology to reach out and bring them into the informal sector, being able to help these small-scale farmers, that will definitely add huge value to Africa. Definitely, I mean, right now, countries are looking, I mean, growing our economy, growing the GDP. That is such a relevant use case. Thank you for that. Funmi, so hearing all this, you know, I always like to say, you know, opportunities must be balanced with the risk so we don't, you know, lose out, you know. So basically, 2021 has commenced with a heightened rate of the pandemic spread. That's what reports say, you know, and I mean, that's what's in the media. So basically, what security measures do you recommend corporations put in place to be best positioned to combat the imminent threats to cybersecurity in 2021?
There are so many risks that have come on. I just remember the EndSARS protest and the fact that some government organizations in Nigeria were even taken down and attacked. So there are so many risks, and some of them are phishing emails. We have phishing emails that trick people. We have incidents where we see that attackers are able to take over your business communication with your customers or your suppliers. They take over, and we call them man in the middle or business email compromise. They just come in the middle and take over the conversation, and you pay money. I talked earlier about ransomware. We've also seen data breaches and all. So there are so many things, and these things, these attacks would flow into 2021 definitely, and we would see that they would even be in they will be higher, and they will come in more terms because people are now becoming bolder and doing more things. So for an organization to be able to survive, the first thing is that a lot of fintechs would need to take security very seriously. There was a study that said that over 60% of small businesses don't even have a plan around cybersecurity. And this is not a year not to have a plan. So the first thing is to have a plan. You have to have a plan. What do I want to secure? What are my exposure points? How do I know? What do I need to do to secure all these exposure points? Do I have to get a firewall? Do I have to get an antivirus on my systems? Do I have to get a new set of systems? Those are the things so your first thing is to start with the strategy and say, these are the things I do, because what we see is that a lot of organizations just react, say, oh, this is a new firewall in town, go and buy it. But the first thing is to step back and say, what are truly my exposure points, and what do I need to secure myself? That is where the strategy comes in. And another very key element, I said earlier that human error accounts for a significant portion of the breaches that we see. Not human error in terms of maybe they're making mistakes, but also in terms of ignorance. So that's where awareness comes in. We need to make sure our people are very much aware of the security risks that they face doing business or performing tasks for the organization. We have remote working now. People are using their systems from different places, using different kinds of Wi-Fi that may even be unsecure. They may even be sitting next to a hacker that is looking at their password as they are typing it in their system. So they have to be aware of their surroundings. They're having confidential meetings, and the people within the house or within the environment are listening in on this confidential information. So they need to do awareness for the people they're working with. Another thing is to test. We need to test. When you have done everything, you've done the strategy, you've implemented, you need to now test. That's when we talk about penetration testing, ethical hacking. You need to get people to come and test that system, because it's better an ethical person tests it and tells you what the issues are than a hacker tests it, because the hacker will not ring the doorbell. The hacker will not tell you this is what I found. The hacker will just go away with those information. So you need to do periodic testing. Another major thing is that you need to have visibility across the network. That's why a number of organizations are now talking about implementing what we call a security operations center, where you do a 24/7 monitoring of your network. So you are able to detect when something bad has happened and someone bad is inside the network. You are able to detect and respond accordingly. You're able, if it's to isolate the system, if it's to send out communication to users, you are able to know. But a lot of organizations now don't even know that an attacker has built a mansion within their network and they think they are fine. But whereas hackers are going along, I said earlier for one of the attacks, for the SolarWinds attack, it is said, some reports said that the attackers were within the network of the organization as far back as first quarter of 2020, and we didn't hear about it until last quarter. So, so you see that a lot of things may have happened and you don't even know. And the last thing is you have to have plans to respond. So a lot of organizations say, God forbid, hackers will not come in. But what if they come in? What will you do? Are you ready? Are you prepared? Do you know? What will you do? What will you say? How will you respond? So it's very important that we also plan for that. Thank you.
Funmi, thank you again for that. I mean, you just mentioned, I mean, the need for a heightened security awareness, more because, I mean, 2020 has changed a lot of things and those things are more or less in place. For example, remote working is now the norm. You know, it used to be the exception, and that does open up, you know, the landscape to more security threats. However, I mean, with proper planning, strategic planning, deliberate measures in place, you know, corporations, even as we talk of growth in Africa, we're talking of the fintech, we're talking of growth in financial transactions, and it gave us some very laudable growth numbers. So the numbers are growing, but as the numbers are growing, the security awareness and measures also need to be kept up to speed so that we do not create an opening that will be counterproductive. Thank you so much. We have a question here. The question basically is saying, you know, talking of all these, the threats that come with the whole, I mean, economic issues that have come up as a result of the pandemic, people losing jobs. I mean, you know, how do you balance that with the opportunity for lending? So we know that lending, micro lending in Africa is huge. We know we see companies in the fintech space that are doing that and are doing very well. But there are real threats from the socio-economic aspect, you know, job insecurity, the lack of data, you know, organized data. So Ini, will you just help us speak to this a bit? How do you balance the risk with the opportunity when it comes to lending?
The thing is, I think one of the critical elements would be finding the appropriate credit scoring methodology or, you know, systems, you know, to be able to, you know, score who qualifies for a credit and who doesn't. You know, and there are several, you know, there are several ways to do that. I think that the credit bureaus in Nigeria, I'm not so sure that the systems are as efficient as I would expect them to be. So fintechs would have to come up with, you know, possible ways, you know, they could use to evaluate someone's ability to pay or to repay. You know, first you also need to be able to determine first the willingness to pay. And then you also need to be able to establish, you know, does the person have the ability to pay? Because someone can be willing to pay, but he does not have the ability to pay. So I think it's just identifying what scoring methods, you know, and there are various tools out there that people can actually, you know, go out to look at. And I mean, there's also lots of data from the telcos that can be used to assess, you know, whether someone has the ability to pay or not. How often does the person credit his or her phone? You know, what kind of, you know, what kind of transactions do they do? I mean, you can get quite a lot of data out there, you know, to help. And interestingly, some of the fintech already have some of this data. It's just mining that data, using that data to determine who qualifies for credit and who doesn't. You know, so it now boils down to your capacity and your ability technically to be able to analyze that data. You know, if you're already an existing operator, but if you're not, then I mean, you go, you know, just there are various methods to do this, and I hope that helps, you know, in clarifying what the person is trying to ask. Yeah,
definitely it does. So first, basically, I mean, what you've just said, I mean, about the fact that the opportunities are there, you have to measure your risk appetite. You talked about credit bureau, there are some, and I know that they are scaling and there is collaboration going on around exchange of data to even build, you know, better credit rating, you know, because that is fairly in its infancy stage in Nigeria and in Africa. So thank you very much. We have another question around, I was just, expecting something to come up around the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area deal that finally went live 1st of January this year. So Funmi, looking at this, now cross-country trade should be enhanced based on this policy that has actually gone live. So Funmi, I'd like you to just speak to us briefly what specific challenges come up as a result of this opening up of borders between countries in Africa, which of course is a great thing when it comes to economic growth, should it be leveraged properly. But what specific new trends do we expect to see in the cybersecurity space as a result of the AFCFTA actions?
The major thing that we see is around regulations, and several organizations, several countries have different regulations around different aspects of technology. So if there's going to be free trading across countries, then regulations around data protection, data privacy. Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, NDPR. A number of organizations, a number of countries also have their own data protection regulations. So it would be a lot of looking at the regulations. How do I comply? What are the requirements of this country? How do they differ from the ones in my country? And especially when doing business and collecting information of customers or people in those countries. So it's regulation. The regulatory landscape is something I think would be an area we would have to tread very swiftly and try to see how we can go around it.
Thank you so much. We're rounding up now. We literally have, just like 2 minutes left. So Preeti, I'd like to end this with you. I'd just like you to tell us, one last word on the foresight. You have given us a lot of information. You've given us specific use cases. You've given us relevant information with respect to the adoption of blockchain. But I'd like you to juxtapose that, with respect to cross-border trade, free trade between zones in Africa, and we'll just use that to wrap up. How do you think, blockchain can help us, really scale with respect to free trade across zones in Africa?
I have just 2 thoughts. The first thought is that with the use of blockchain technology, if it can help with the ease of doing business, if it can help with lowering the barriers to entry for the small and medium enterprises to participate in the more mainstream trade of goods and commerce. And the last thought is around currencies. So there's a lot of currencies and there's a lot of currency instabilities. The expenses associated with the exchange of currencies, it adds to the trading with each other being expensive. So the blockchain technology has a lot of offer when it comes to that, to ensure that we lower those barriers, we lower costs, we lower barriers to entry, and a veil system that ensures that nobody is left behind. It's about increased transparency. It's about democratizing real value and ensuring that there's exclusive benefit across value chains.
Thank you so much, Preeti. You couldn't have said better. Again, we're wrapping up. Someone just asked the question. I'd like to just ask the panel. Funmi, do you think we'll need a continental fintech regulation to drive AFCFTA, to complement it? Do you think that we actually need one, maybe a continental fintech and cybersecurity regulation, to complement the AFCFTA?
Yes, I agree that would be a good idea, because that would make all the countries have like a single point of reference when you're talking about trading and when you're talking about security requirements across the landscape. It's a lot of other countries have actually adopted that, and I think it's something that would be beneficial.
Okay, fantastic. So that brings us to the end of this interesting and engaging panel. We're very time conscious, we want to keep to time. So again, you've heard it all. The opportunities are real. 2020 was it's actually an unforgettable year. I doubt if there's anyone that will forget 2020, forget it anytime soon. But with the issues of 2020 came opportunities, and the fintech space, the financial technology industry was one that was fortunate to be able to see huge growth as a result of the things that happened in 2020. We look into 2021 with a lot of positivity, but we are also very conscious of the challenges that come along with the opportunities, specifically around risk, around security. Technologies are coming up every day, new types of technology, and it's so exciting to see that cryptocurrency and blockchain technology is actually solving real problems. 2021 started off with the AFCA FTA taking off, and the fact that the blockchain can actually complement that is opportunity undefined. I mean, so that is what the summary of what the panel has said today. I mean, we've been able to go through some questions. We still have a few more questions, but we cannot take it because of time. But I'm very sure that the association will find a way of reaching out to you. I can see that some of us have dropped our email addresses to respond to that question. So thank you very much. We're wrapping up here. I'd like to hand back over to Dr. Obrimah to just help us wrap up today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oremeyi. I mean, Sean will be wrapping up. That's his role in today's.
Sean, over to you. Sean, over to you.
I mean, we are very grateful to the speakers. Key salient points have been made. You know, we see a lot of opportunities, but we have to be prepared to take these opportunities. And, you know, the president clearly also said it is high time the continent move from low-level software development to advanced one, making real impact. And that touches on all the things that have been said. We need advanced data analytics tool. We need to progress in blockchain. We need to, you know, be more advanced even in approach to cyber threats. And what have you. We are really grateful to you, Pretty, for joining us. Thank you, Oremeyi, for facilitating a very exciting session. Thank you, Funmilola. Thank you, Ini. We are grateful to you all. Thank you, all participants. I mean, one of the key things we do at Fintech NGR is to advance education, because we know if we are not properly educated, we will not be able to adequately take advantage of what COVID-19 and even the changing dynamics offers all of us. So we thank you for being part of this. The next session, which we are inviting you to join us, will happen in February 19, and that is going to talk about investment opportunities for fintechs, for startups. So we are going to be looking, it's not going to be a talk show. We are bringing individuals who are going to show you the investment opportunities that they have in their portfolio. So we want to invite you to join us again. We also inviting those of you who are not yet our members. You need to join us in continuing to drive fintech growth, fintech advancement across Nigeria and across Africa. And finally, I just wanted to touch on the point raised on regulation across Africa. We are the founding member of Africa Fintech Network. That network has representatives of about 40 national fintech associations across Africa. I think we can take this feedback to them and say we need to begin to look at developing continental fintech regulation that can complement AFCFTA. That's a good take-home, a good assignment for us. We want to thank you once again, and we look forward to coming your way very soon. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, participants. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.